those terms are correct, however, they've exceeded the term limit. So just wanted to make that note. And in the future, if we can get resumes and not the names of the people that didn't make the nomination. So that's typically how we do it here. There was a misunderstanding with the clerk this time, but going forward.
I didn't know resumes were given, so I have them, I just deliberately kept them out of the packet. And because I didn't know how this was going forward, I did not remove the other applicants.
Yes, and I'm not saying that you did anything wrong, I'm just saying
Okay.
moving forward, just so everyone's clear, we'll look at, when we get nominations for appointments, we'll have what am I saying, resume and or application, and we don't need to know all the names of the other candidates. That's typically how we do it, just so that we're clear with everyone here. Is that okay with the board? Okay. Okay. Saying that, I would move to consider the bid board appointments, Adrian Shea, or approve the bid board, Adrian Shea and Dr. Ned Brooks. Second. Any discussion? Trustee McKay.
I would like to say that at the bid board meeting, there was a great discussion about what a good problem it is to have too many interested applicants, and that all of those are going to be encouraged to participate in meetings, join subcommittees, and be active so that when future openings become available, you know, they are still going to be considered if they're still interested.
Thank you. Okay, with no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will, Leanne, are we ready or should I move to the next one?
Thank you. Each have one.
Okay, so we will wait to approve the consent agenda items, and we will move to public hearing, which there are none. Citizens to be heard. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda? That is on the agenda. Not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, which is new business. Consider RFP on organics collection program. And who's here to speak on that? Tyler.
Right. I'll tee this up real quick for you. Early in 2017, I think it was around April or so, the village board voted to initiate a pilot program for organics collection that would take organic materials as well as yard waste. A third-party hauler would take that, and we limited it to 100 individuals to participate in the program. So that's been going a little over a year now. Our Conservation Committee Chair, Josh Lucatori, as well as some members of the Conservation Committee, such as Linda Frank, helped with an effort putting together an annual report, which I'm not going to go into detail, but if you guys have questions after my brief presentation, they're here to respond to any questions. But those metrics are put together or shared in the memo for you. It's at a point where I don't think a trial period is a trial any further, and a governing body has to make a decision on whether to move forward with a permanent program or not. So the action in front of you tonight is not necessarily you being like, we're all in, we're doing a permanent program. It's authorizing staff to start an RFP process to get some proposals for a permanent program for your future consideration. Probably what this would look like, I've got the timeline laid out for you, but over the next month or so, we would get together proposals, take a look at that, and then during your second meeting of October, probably bring a service agreement and recommendation for you to consider as far as what a permanent program would look like. It would also be at that time that you as a village board would talk about the subsidy that you want to offer participants as well. So we don't need to have that discussion tonight. That has no impact on the third party as far as their rates. That's more of an internal decision and what the rates are for the participants. But it is something that we did still specify in the RFP because we thought that's just helpful information for the third parties to know about. So if you read the RFP that's drafted, we will review that. So, yes.
Does the RFP need to specify how many participants?
So we say right now 100, we probably wouldn't want to do the program if it's less than 100. We don't think it would be necessarily worthwhile, just considering the amount of administrative support that the program would need. The fact that we already have 100 people and 30 people on the waiting list, I wouldn't, even if the subsidy went away, I don't know if that would necessarily impact it where we go less than 100. So I don't worry about that. But we do have to budget for a number. So I think what we're proposing is that if we would not add more than 200 in a given year. So it'd be maxed out at 300 for the first year, and then every year afterwards, you would have what we would budget for no more than 200 additional participants. Does that make sense? So that we lay out in the RFP for the third party to know.
But they can give you prices?
Yes. So they will be giving us prices based on number of participants. So if you look at attachment A, which is the cost sheet, we're proposing up to a 3-year agreement. So that's assuming that we would add 200 every year. So eventually you're going to get to, let's be a little optimistic for a second. If we get up to 700 people, we would have a rate provided from them through this RFP process. Even though that wouldn't be really needed until the year 2021, we see all that data up front.
Trustee Menta.
Yeah, information that would be useful, not necessarily for the RFP, but for us to have, I think, considering the subsidy, is I know that to the extent we're composting, we're reducing garbage and tipping fees. So it would be really helpful. And I know the report that the Conservation Committee did, I think references like total weight of compost that's removed from the waste stream. Would it be helpful from a fiscal perspective to say, how much are we saving in garbage tipping fees and garbage transport fees by the compost program? So just for the future, I'd like to.
You want to know that specifically for the October meeting when the service agreement is considered?
Because if we're saving, if the compost program is saving us money, then I can see taking that savings as a subsidy.
As a subsidy, right? That's I would 100% agree with that. I mean, we'll have a general estimate. And I'll have to work with Leanne, but I don't.
Refuse is $4 to $6 a ton.
Yeah, so we can do that computation. I didn't want to mix that in for tonight,
No, I know, for the future.
but for October, we'll
And
definitely
it
have
may be
that.
very little, it may only be like 50 cents, who knows?
Right.
I think.
It's a good metric though for you to know when having that
Yes.
subsidy discussion. I would 100% agree.
Um,
Other questions?
Trustee Bockhorst?
Well, I would like to make a motion unless there are questions. So we
I
can
have-
move along.
I can ask you that when you're done with the motion.
Okay, I move to authorize staff to issue the request for proposals for organic food site collection services.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I just have a quick question. There was some language that wasn't consistent, and it was just the size of the actual cart. I know we're using the smaller one with the lid that closes, correct? And I don't remember if it's in, which one of it was in, but one of them references that the village is using the 65, the bigger one. So I just wanted
35 is the size of the
right.
the brown carts. So if there's any 65, yeah, that needs to be changed. So that might have been just
review that before you
error
go
might
back.
be out.
And then the last question is.
Do you know what page that was
I
on?
don't.
Okay, I'll do a search for 65 and see what comes up.
Great, thank you. And then, do we see, maybe Leanne knows this, but are the compost containers full? Or are they half full, like our garbage containers, most of them are half, or recycling is half, I can't remember.
idea.
No.
What-
I've had some conversation with some users as well as Melissa, who's with Compost Crusader. I mean, if people are using the yard waste as well, like it's full, but a lot of times, I mean, the carts itself, I mean, they're not that full, they're not that full at all.
The only reason I ask is, it's very clear that you can put yard waste in there, not all of it, and I read which ones can and cannot. But we also manage yard waste carts, so I'm just wondering if there's opportunity with the larger cart to combine the two services. Meaning, put your organics and your yard waste that's allowed in there, and the rest we no longer collect. It's a revenue generator
You have an
in the
opinion?
end, but
You
while
have
we're
an
on the
opinion?
topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's something we've talked about before and other iterations of this conversation, but we're talking about two different programs. So we're talking about an existing village program whose processing vendor does not accept food scraps. And we're talking about a special arrangement with a processor who does on a much smaller scale.
So let me just, I'll bring it up in budget, that's why I want to give you the heads up. If it's possible, if we're looking at expenditure reductions in the future or this budget season, one of the options may be to just continue, if we can utilize this service with a bigger cart and save money and then discontinue a program. I know it doesn't take all of the same things.
Yeah, I'm just pivoting real quick to Josh and Linda because I know one of the discussion points that came up when we had that brief discussion conservation committee was the fact that if you have like the ratio between yard waste and compost materials, that if you have so much yard waste, it's not as beneficial. Is that an inaccurate statement? This is just not my area of expertise. That's why I'm referring to you two.
Not really, not
Okay.
really. I mean, I think the perception of a food scraps processor is that they have more nitrogen-rich material, and so they produce a richer compost. But
Okay, but that's not
I
necessarily.
can tell you that compost is compost. It has the same properties,
Okay.
whether it comes from wood chips or.
Yeah, so,
Could you
go
state your
go-
email address, sorry.
Linda Frank, member of the Conservation Committee, 4321 North Prospect. I am a participant in the pilot program, and from my experience, I am finding the little 35 gallon cart to be adequate for a lot of the yard waste that I generate and weeds and such. They do, their stated limit for yard waste is pencil thin, as far as branches or that type of thing. So anything that is thicker than that would need to go into the bag. But I'm still finding our little brown carts very handy for the yard waste, and that certainly is what will fill it up. The food scraps aren't going to fill it up.
But to your broader point,
Yeah,
this is how most communities solve this problem, is they just combine
yes.
the two.
So, just for clarity's sake, because, I mean, if this was the direction the board wanted to take now, definitely have to incorporate an RFP. So, President Rosick, are you suggesting that as more of a long-term vision after a few years, that would be something that we would
It could be
consider in
after
a
this
future
budget
RFP?
season.
Or is
So-
that some?
Could you get quotes similar, I know that people don't like giving multiple facets, but could you get quotes for the 65 gallon and the 32 like we did in the first one? So in other words, we're not ruling out
I'm going to tell you it's going to change my timeline.
how much.
You're talking about someone that doesn't necessarily know all the complete logistics behind our current, yard waste collection. So it's like, that's going to require at least a meeting with, I need to sit down with Leanne to learn about it. As
I'm
far as
just
how to
asking-
integrate it in the RFP, we would not be able to have it by October.
No,
Now you're looking
nothing
like
more than
November.
just, you don't need the whole program nailed down. All I'm saying is, if there is a will of the board through the budget when we're looking at, we need to come up with some expenditure reductions, and that our conservation committee is saying this is where it's actually better. If that was the will of the board, is there a way to write the RFP just to get quotes on the bigger container?
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah.
From the collection vendor's point of view, there's no difference between a 32 gallon and a 65
Right,
gallon.
it's just asking.
What they want is frequency of tips. They don't, it's
Oh, I see.
the route that matters. It's not the size of the cart. They're going to pay more on their end to tip it at the processor because it's theoretically heavier, but it shouldn't change the customer pricing. Does that make sense?
So in our first RFP, I read it last night again, the first program RFP, the contract, it gave us prices for both, and it was higher for the 65 gallon container, but it wasn't speeding up it wasn't frequency, it was more of the container and the cost between the different containers. And so I understand what Josh is saying, which is maybe we just keep the same size container and you could increase your frequency of pickup, is that correct?
I just have a lot of questions though, because like right now it's on a participant basis, but for yard waste, I mean, that's,
We service
That's-
every home
that's-
every week.
right, so that's not a participant base, that's open to the community, so that's, in my eyes, it's a much different program, which makes this RFP a lot more complex. Like I could do it, but that's why I would need probably admin time, and I think that's a big enough change. I would almost want to take the RFP back to you before issuing it out. Because there's just some elements that I'm going to have to change to make that happen.
And I'm sorry to keep belaboring this, but it could be a pilot program. You take the 200 people or whoever, you say, we're gonna, if, you know, we're gonna discontinue. I'm just saying, if we wanted to test it, this would be the time to do it. Liam.
I think the,
Excuse me, trustee Blackhurst? This is why the meetings go long, because we ask questions?
I didn't say that, but they do go on because we are off topic slightly.
Yes, thank you.
I think that, you know, the glitch, if you want to call it that here, is that, you know, we're